about moving at the speed of trust, life in the fast lane. So obviously, when we're moving at the speed of trust, we want to get to the fast lane. We want to be moving as quickly as possible. And this sort of speaks to the agile approach to, development and, solutions. Because when we think about agility, we think about moving quickly with ease. And for me, one of the best, greases to grease the wheels on that is trust. So I'm going to go ahead and start my slideshow and share my screen. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to do a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the speed of trust by the numbers. So there's 2 dimensions to trust. There's 5 waves of trust. There's 13 behaviors. Then we're going to do a little bit of a summary, and then we'll go into our Q&A. So currently my position, I'm a senior digital transformation consultant with Capstone Ridge Group. And when we look at the transformation lifecycle here, we can see that there's a lot going on. We talk about strategic planning, we talk about risk management, we talk about process improvements, right? This is all the kind of things that we do. Now, in order to be able to do this effectively, obviously it requires a large degree of trust between the consultant or the analyst and the business. So Stephen M.R. Covey, you might recognize him from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. His quote here is that change moves at the speed of trust. So we can only move as quickly as our stakeholders trust us. And the more that our stakeholders trust us, the more quickly we can move and the better business benefits that we get. So he's written a number of books, this fellow. I'm sure you're familiar with his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But he's also written the Speed of Trust book. So what I'm going to present today is based on somewhat on what he's written in this book, but also on my personal experiences after 24 years working in IT. So he's got this really great quote here, which I quite appreciate. You can ignore the principles that govern trust, but they will not ignore you. So whether or not you want to acknowledge it or embrace it, trust is definitely a thing in your day-to-day life and in how you do your job. So why do we care, right? We get paid, we go to work, we do our thing. Why do we care about trust? Why is that important? Well, obviously, whenever we're dealing with people, it's really important that we develop relationships, that we have high trust relationships. When we have high trust relationships, if we say the wrong thing, if we make a misstep, people will still understand us. People will accept the fact that we are doing our best and that we are trying to help them and that we, are bringing everything we can to the table. If it's a low trust relationship, even if you communicate precisely, people will misinterpret you and not give you the benefit of the doubt and, kind of assume that you're doing the wrong thing. So what does this mean to our business? Well, when you have high trust relationships, projects and business outcomes are improved. You can move more quickly and you can get better outcomes. If you think about it, again, if you bring in an analyst, you don't bring in an analyst or consultant because everything's going well. You bring in an analyst or a consultant because there's a problem to solve and there's root causes to that problem. And the business is basically going to air their dirty laundry to you and they need to trust you in order to be able to do that. So if they trust you, you'll get more information, you'll get a fuller picture of what's actually happening, and then you can be way more effective in what you're doing. So 2 dimensions of trust, character and competence. So as far as character is concerned, character is required for trust under any circumstance, in any relationship, in any endeavor, in any engagement. As far as competence is concerned, competence is situational and it depends on what the circumstances require. It may be that you need competencies in project management, that you need competencies in BA, in the agile framework, so on and so forth. Simon Sinek is this American author, and he's written a number of books about business and leadership. And he says, trust has 2 dimensions, competency and integrity. We will forgive mistakes of competence. Mistakes of integrity are harder to overcome. And this is very, very true. And again, if we think about the high trust relationship, if we do make a mistake in our competence, as long as the stakeholders believe in our character, the relationship will survive and will be able to be effective. There are 5 waves of trust. There's self-trust, relationship trust, organizational trust, market trust, and societal trust. So for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to focus on self-trust and relationship trust. I will briefly touch upon organizational and market and societal trust, just to sort of, flesh out a little bit what they mean, but we're not going to dive into a whole lot of detail on that. So self-trust. There's this great quote here from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he was this old-timey writer and philosopher. Self-trust is the first secret of success. So self-trust basically is driving our ability to achieve our goals and set goals, right? If we don't trust ourselves, then we don't set, high bars for ourselves. It drives our ability to keep our commitments, to walk our talk, and to inspire trust in others. Now, there are four cores related to self-trust: integrity, intent, capabilities, and results. Integrity. This is a great quote from C.S. Lewis, and he's an author. Integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. So I read an interesting bit about what integrity means, and there was this shopping cart example. So integrity apparently is if you are out shopping and you return the shopping cart to the shopping corral, even if you don't get your dollar back or there's no reward associated with it, which I thought was pretty interesting. So what does integrity mean, really? Well, there's kind of four pillars of integrity: congruence, courage, humility, and openness. So congruence basically means alignment, where there is no gap between what you intend and how you behave. And basically your internal values are aligning with your actions. So you're not doing things that you're not comfortable doing. You're doing things that align with your personal values. Humility is a big one. So this is all about, check your ego at the door. And that's a very, very important concept for analysts, especially, working with businesses that are struggling with problems. You don't want to, come in and be, the person that's criticizing or that's, um, saying that I know everything and you know nothing. So you have to be concerned about what's right as opposed to being right. Of course, you're going to be right because you know more about the frameworks, you know more about the development cycle, you know about what to do, but you want to do the right thing. So the other part of humility is, again, with your ego, you want to act on good ideas as opposed to claiming credit for them. That's the important bit. Courage is integral because it's hard. It's hard to, say things that the business doesn't want to hear. It's hard to be the person in the room that has the solution when it's not obvious to everyone else. It's hard to speak up when you see something that's not right. So courage is, not just about your actions, but also about the information that you provide. You have to be prepared to have those tough conversations. Integrity also means openness. So you can't be married to your own ideas. You have to be open to new ideas. This is how we learned. So closed mindsets foster suspicion and mistrust. It's very important that we're open. So intent, Jim Carrey, he's a very famous comedian and actor. Intention is everything. Nothing happens on this planet without it. Not one single thing has ever been accomplished without intention. So, it's all fine and good to have these vague, free floating ideas about how you should be or what you should do. But intention is actually really important. Intention will drive you towards, the end goal. So intention has basically three components: motive, which is obviously the reason why we do something. And the greatest trust is inspired by genuine caring. If you actually care about what you're doing, if you actually care about the outcomes, if you actually care about your stakeholders, if you care about the business, if you want what's best for them. Agenda grows out of motive, and agenda is about, again, wanting what's best for everybody. And that will inspire the greatest trust. And again, trust is, the really important thing that gets things moving. Now, the really important part of intent, of course, is behavior, which is the manifestation of your motive and agenda. Capabilities. Anil Sinha, and this is interesting. This fellow is actually basically the CIA head in India, like the equivalent of the CIA in India. And he's apparently eminently quotable, because if you go on the internet, you'll find a whole bunch of quotes by him, which I think is interesting. So he says the best possible preparation of success is to empower yourself with trust and self capabilities. So what does that mean, capabilities? Well, there's a few different, dimensions here. So there's our talents and our skills, and this is the means and the tools that we use to produce our results. And obviously, as BAs, we have a lot of tools in our toolbox. And part of our capabilities is understanding which tools we need to apply in any given situation. Another key component of our talents and skills is that we do this continuous improvement and professional development, which of course is why we're all here at this professional development day. The second component of our capabilities is our knowledge and experience, and that of course is our hands-on real-world engagements and our practical understanding of any given knowledge domain. Now, the third capability component is our attitude and style. Now, this is actually really important. So attitudes is, the set of emotions, beliefs, and behaviors. And our style is how we conduct ourselves when we plan out our work, when we do our tasks, and when we communicate. And I want to share something with you regarding capabilities, regarding attitude. Recently, I was told by one of my clients, who is a vice president of IT at a very successful company. He communicated to my consulting company that it was the best experience he'd ever had with a consultant was dealing with me. And of course, I was very curious about that statement. So I went to him and I said, okay, well, you have to tell me what that means. Like, why is this the best experience? And he told me, I have dealt with other consultants, other analysts that are as talented as you, but they were snarky and condescending. And he said he really enjoyed working with me because of my attitude and because of my, bedside manner. So I can't stress enough how important attitude is. There's that great quote, attitude is everything. Well, it isn't everything, but it's a whole lot. So, that's something to keep in mind. Of course, results are important. Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think we all know Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's a very famous dude, very successful, very driven, very hardworking guy. If you don't find the time, if you don't do the work, you don't get the results. So when it comes to results, results are a little bit nebulous in that if you don't define, the expected outcomes, what you think are good results may not be what the business thinks is good results. So when you are thinking about results, there's two critical questions. What results are we getting and how are we getting those results? An important part about results as well is that we need to effectively and honestly communicate our results. And this includes negative outcomes and results. And this especially includes negative outcomes and results. I found that I've seen a number of situations where, project teams are reluctant to communicate to the business, where they're having struggles, where they're behind on their timelines. And it ends up being like a big surprise at the end of the day that something's happening when it could have been communicated, a lot sooner. So we have to be, open to the fact that we do have to communicate negative messages. So the second wave of trust is relationship trust. And as far as relationship trust goes, according to Stephen Covey, there are 13 behaviors that will build trust. So we're going to go through each one of these. This is just kind of the high level menu. In addition to Stephen Covey's 13 behaviors, I have an additional two that I've sort of realized in my career. Two behaviors that have helped me and are my special sauce and are a recipe for success. So there are character-based behaviors. There are 5 character-based behaviors of the 13 behaviors. And Mahatma Gandhi, who interestingly enough, he was actually a lawyer. And I didn't know this until I started doing a little bit of research on him. We think of him as this, kind of guru and this sort of spiritual fellow. But yeah, he started off as a lawyer. Your character must be above suspicion and you must be truthful and self-controlled. So the 5 character-based behaviors, according to Stephen Covey, are talking straight, demonstrating respect, creating transparency, righting wrongs, and showing loyalty. Now, there are also 5 competence-based behaviors. And there's this quote by Yagi Vasudev, and he is actually a very famous yoga guru. If you want to be successful, don't seek success. Seek competence, empowerment, doing nothing short of the best that you can do. So as far as competence-based behaviors, we're talking about delivering results, getting better, confronting reality, clarifying expectations, and practicing accountability. Now, the final 3 behaviors, according to Stephen Covey, are character and competence-based, so a combination of these two things. And those 3 are listen first, keep commitments, and extend trust. So Stephen here says, trust is equal parts character and competence. You can look at any leadership failure and it's always a failure of one or the other. And, my thought on that is, why can't it be both? Because I've seen that too. So the bonus behaviors is something that I'm calling connection-based behaviors. And these are behaviors that I have, observed in my career. And the first behavior is to be encouraging. And the second behavior is to demonstrate empathy. And I think that empathy has been a really hot topic, in the pandemic, with businesses trying to be empathetic towards their employees that are struggling with, having kids at home, having to work from home, the isolation of the pandemic, so on and so forth. So empathy, I know, has been a really hot topic, but it's something that I myself have been practicing for a very long time. So John C. Maxwell is a fellow that is a business dude, and he's written a lot of books and he does a lot of speaking engagements. And he says there are three qualities a leader must exemplify to build trust: competence, connection, and character. So Stephen talks about competence and character. John also incorporates connection. And for me, that's a really important component. So let's go through these. Number one, this is the character-based behavior, is talk straight. So we know what that means, right? Be honest, be frank, be above board. Don't be disingenuous, speak the truth. One of the things that I want to be aware of as we're going through these behaviors is that even though we have the right intention, sometimes we find ourselves falling into this trap of we think we're doing the right thing, but we've really sort of gone astray. So one of the things that's important to call out is where there's counterfeit behaviors, where we think we're talking straight, but we're not. We're doing something else, and we need to be mindful of these things because it's very easy, to kind of slide into these traps. So some counterfeit behaviors is like beating around the bush, not wanting to come to the point because it's, not good information that you want to share, withholding information, not telling the full picture. And then the third one, which I see more often than the other two, is technically telling the truth, but basically you're leaving a false impression. So I'm pretty sure we've all been in situations like that where, information is being reported and technically it's correct, but it doesn't really paint the full picture or the true picture of what is happening. The second character-based behavior is demonstrating respect. So, with respect, we're talking about fairness, kindness, and civility. Some counterfeit behaviors that we have to be mindful of that we want to avoid is fake respect and concern, as in we don't really feel it. We're not actually feeling the respect, we're just faking it. And this other one that I see more often is showing respect and concern for some people, and those people being the people that can benefit you, and then not showing respect for everybody, as in those people that can't. And my golden rule is respect everything, respect the process, respect the client, respect the stakeholder, respect everything and respect yourself, respect everything that we're doing. This is very important. Our third character-based behavior is creating transparency. So you want to be open and genuine, honesty, integrity, authenticity. I think that being authentic is sort of a term that's been a little bit overused as of late, but it's actually really important. So when we're not being authentic, when we're not being open, these counterfeit behaviors are we're hiding and we're covering things up and we're obscuring information. There's hidden agendas, there's hidden meanings, there's stuff we're not telling our clients or stakeholders. We're not being honest about it. And then this whole idea of illusion, pretending, that things are okay, pretending that everything's on track, pretending that things are going well when really they're not. And we know they're not, but we're just not communicating that. We're not being transparent about it. Number 4 on the character-based behaviors is righting wrongs. I really quite like this cartoon here. Okay, I admit it, we're lost. But the important thing to do is remain focused on whose fault it is. I've actually seen this in action. I'm sure we all have. This is some trap that we all fall into. But ultimately, righting wrongs, we have to admit that we've made a mistake. We have to do what it takes to correct that mistake. We have to demonstrate our humility, and we have to, right the wrongs, right? So some of the counterfeit behaviors that we might fall into is denying or justifying the wrongs. Well, sure, I made a mistake, but you did this, but I was this, but this, and that's not the way to do it. Of course, there's that whole blame game where we fail to admit our mistakes, we blame other people. And then what I see frequently is this idea of covering up mistakes. We don't we're not forthright about our mistakes. We don't come forward and say, yes, we've taken a misstep here. This has not gone the way that we wanted it to. So the way to do this is, yes, we made a mistake, and here's what we're going to do to correct it. There's no other way. Number 5 is showing loyalty. So with loyalty to the process, loyalty to the team, loyalty to the stakeholders, and ultimately we need to acknowledge the contributions of others. So some of the things that happen, counterfeit behaviors regarding loyalty, is when someone's in the room, we give them credit, or when we talk to them one-on-one, we say, yeah, that was a great idea that you had. But when they're not around, we take the credit for ourselves, or we downplay their role or their contribution. The other thing that I see a lot of is this whole idea of being two-faced, where we sweet talk people in front of them, but we badmouth them behind their backs. In my view, this is one of the most toxic behaviors that I've come across. Being a consultant, I go to a lot of different industries. I work with a lot of different businesses and a lot of different peoples. And, you know, um, I see a lot of this sort of contention between IT resources and the business. And I see a lot of this, sort of glad handing in front of people, but then there's the whole, talking behind their back and criticizing the business behind their back. And the reality is we all have different skill sets. And just because the business is not good at IT, or they may not be good at IT, doesn't mean that they're not good at what they do. So that has to be appreciated. So that's something that I personally have gone out on a limb and shut people down and said, no, that's not how we do this. And this is not healthy. This is not a good behavior. So in my view, this is one of the most toxic things that I've seen. So I think this is really important to avoid. So competence-based behaviors, we need to get better. So again, we're all here, at this conference because we're trying to improve our skills. So this is about continuous learning and growth, learning from our mistakes, seeking feedback. So some of the counterfeit behaviors, how can there be counterfeit behaviors around getting better, right? And improving? Well, there's this concept of being an internal student where we're always learning something, we're learning some new concepts, but we never actually apply those concepts and produce, artifacts and produce results based on those new concepts. We're just constantly in learning mode. And then the other thing that we do is basically, there's this great quote, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So sometimes we fall into this trap of force fitting whatever we're doing into what we're good at. So, if we're good at a particular modeling technique, we might decide that modeling technique is the technique for modeling everything that we touch. Confronting reality is really important. So again, we talked about, sort of negative messaging, how it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of strength to be able to do that. So this is great. Denial is the first stage of, no, it isn't. Yeah, for sure. So sometimes reality is not pleasant. Sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes, we're dealing with a business unit or an organization and they're really struggling and there's policy issues and process issues and people issues. We can't avoid that reality. We have to accept that. So some counterfeit behaviors associated with that would be acting as though we're confronting reality, but we're really just evading and avoiding the real issues. Sometimes what we do is we put up a prop issue. We decide that, we're going to communicate that this issue is the root cause of the problem when we know for a fact that it's not. And I find in a lot of cases, we might identify process issues where the actual issues have to do with people, and people issues are actually very difficult to deal with. So I find that that's an area where we definitely will exhibit that counterfeit behavior, and that should be avoided. So painting a rosy picture of an ugly truth. Yes, there is silver linings to every dark cloud, absolutely, but we have to acknowledge the dark cloud before we can focus on the silver lining. If we only focus on the silver lining, then we are definitely avoiding the reality. So I think this is a great diagram. I'm pretty sure we've all seen this, sort of the different images of what's being presented or what the solution is. And this all around this competence base is clarifying expectations. I cannot stress enough how important it is to set expectations with your stakeholders. So basically, this means openly communicating and always, always, always verifying your understanding of the ask. So that has a lot to do with paraphrasing, with proper documentation, with, definitely review. So some counterfeit behaviors associated here is pretending to clarify, but we're not doing enough to pin down the specifics. Sometimes, the business can be a little vague and a little reluctant to actually, pin themselves down, shall we say, to a requirement. So that's where, as analysts, we have to, be courageous, and we have to hold the business accountable, and we have to verify those requirements and be very specific. The other thing that happens, and I do see a lot of this, is situational expectations. you know um, those can shift if they're not properly documented, if they're not properly agreed on. So we're in a meeting and we talk about stuff and nobody writes it down, and then we deliver something and the business is like, this is what I asked for. And you know we're like, well, no, yeah, I'm pretty sure it is, we had that meeting and we talked about it. So that's definitely something to be avoided and something to be mindful of. I don't think that this necessarily happens deliberately or with intent. I think that the situational expectations is something that we fall into because it's easier than actually, producing a difficult thing. It's inconvenient, shall we say. So the 10th competence-based behavior is to practice accountability. And I quite like this cartoon here. Your shipment was delivered to the wrong address, so technically it's your fault for choosing not to live there. Honestly, I swear I've heard this statement before in real life. So obviously accountability is holding ourselves accountable, but not just ourselves. We have to hold others accountable. And that actually takes a lot of courage as well. That's very difficult to do. So a big piece of this is to clarify who is accountable for what. And again, documentation is your go-to here. So counterfeit behaviors associated with this characteristic is obscuring who's accountable, passing the buck, saying, no, 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 that's not on me, that's on someone else. And then again, this notion of playing the blame game. So blaming others, accusing others, this is not good. So now the next three characteristics are both character and competence based. So listen first. And this is a great quote by Stephen R. Covey. And again, very, very bright dude, written a lot of very, very, relevant business books. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. Most people listen with the intent to reply. And I know we've all done this. We've all been in conversations where, rather than listening, we're formulating our response to the, whatever the person is communicating to us. So active listening is a thing. Active listening is a critical skill for BAs, and it's something that we all need to focus on. So some counterfeit behaviors, some things that, again, if we're not mindful, we might fall into these, is pretending to be listening. We're just kind of smiling, nodding, and yep, yep, yep. And we're not really actually listening or hearing what, is being communicated to us. Again, the formulating replies instead of listening. So in our head, we're like, oh yeah, this, right? And we're not actually listening. We're just, figuring out what we're going to say when we have our turn. And then the other thing that we need to be mindful of is body language and social cues. And this has gotten really, really important in the pandemic, with all the remote work and with all the remote meetings and everything like that. This has gotten a lot more difficult. And I will say that having the remote and being on screen has definitely changed the body language and the social cues and our ability to recognize it. So there's a lot of information available on the internet about, how this has shifted in the pandemic with remote work and with, being on the Zoom meetings and everything like that. So something to think about, maybe something to research and investigate is, how that has changed and how that impacts you and how you can, sort of, deal with that. So number 12, again, this is character and competence-based behavior, is keeping commitments. So I really like this diagram. I've seen this a number of times, but yes, bacon and eggs, the chicken was involved, the pig was committed. So when we're keeping our commitments, we're demonstrating our integrity. We're doing what we said we were going to do. We're not trying to get out of it. We're not trying to, indicate that we did something when we didn't, right? We are being accountable to ourselves and accountable to our stakeholders. So some of the things that we might do, to kind of go around this keeping commitments, is making vague and elusive commitments, like not being specific about what we're going to do, or not making commitments at all. I have had the great joy of talking to some people that, can talk many, many words and say nothing, and can, talk about what they're going to do, but not actually commit to anything. And I've seen this, and it makes me realize that this is something we can fall into if we're not mindful. So behavior 13 is extending trust. Now, this is important. You have to give to get, right? So we can't expect our stakeholders to extend this high level of trust to us unless we are willing to trust them. And sometimes we have to go first. Sometimes we have to be the one to demonstrate that trust so that we can get it back from them. And sometimes when you're dealing with stakeholders in a business, sometimes they have never been extended trust or extended trust, and this can be very challenging. But going into this with an attitude, your attitude has to be the fundamental belief that most people are capable of being trusted, and they want to be trusted, and they will do well when they're trusted. Now, we know that there are bad actors in our world. We know that this isn't always the case, but in my experience, that's a minimum. And in my experience, sometimes bad actors are not actually bad actors. They're just misunderstood. And if you take the time to listen and work with them, it turns out that whatever negative behaviors they're exhibiting are not deliberate and are not intended to derail anything. They just, basically need to be understood. So some counterfeit behaviors is extending the false trust. So I see this sometimes on project teams where we give people responsibility, but we don't give them authority and we don't give them resources. And ultimately we're asking them to accomplish a task, but what we're saying is, yeah, okay, well, this is your responsibility, but I'm not going to give you what you need to do to complete it. And that's false trust. And then, obviously, sometimes we're acting like we trust somebody when we really don't actually trust them. And that sometimes is a little hard to overcome. And sometimes, like, we know you got to fake it till you make it. So that might be a thing, but something to be mindful of. If you are extending false trust, that's something that you need to be aware of. So Confucius here has this great quote, and I love this word. There's one word which may serve as a rule of practice for all one's life, and that's reciprocity. Reciprocity is big in my world, and it's extremely important when it comes to trust. So we've gone through the 13 behaviors that Stephen Covey documented, and I want to go over 2 behaviors that I have observed and that I embrace and that I encourage others to embrace. So I'll tell you a story. I'll share with you the consulting company that I'm currently working for. When I had a conversation, when I was joining the company, I had a conversation with one of the managing partners, and she asked me, what is my special sauce? Obviously, she said, obviously, Sheila, you're very successful. What is your special sauce? Why are you so successful, in your role as a consultant, as a business analyst? And I was a little like sort of on the spot there because I hadn't really thought about special sauce. Yes, I have the skills, I have the certifications, I have the experience. I hadn't thought about this special sauce aspect. When she asked me though, the first thing that came into my mind was, and I said this, I kind of blurted it out. I said, well, I'm helpful. Okay, so obviously we're helpful, right? The business brings us in to help them solve a problem, right? To improve what they're doing, so on and so forth. So, I mean, that seems kind of facile, right? Saying that I'm helpful. So we actually talked about it and we sort of unpacked what that meant, that I'm helpful. And that's where these other 2 behaviors that I'm going to talk to you about came up. So behavior number 1, that's my behavior that I embrace, is to be encouraging. So that sounds pretty straightforward, but a lot of times we can get to the point where we're very clinical with our stakeholders, where we're doing the right things, we're doing the right processes, we're not necessarily extending our humanity. So how do we be encouraging? What does that look like? Well, sharing positive thoughts with others, praising all progress, even if it's small. The businesses, we're transforming businesses, we are helping them to resolve their issues. Sometimes it's baby steps. Sometimes people have been doing what they've been doing for a really long time, and it's hard for them to change. So even small steps, if it's in the right direction, let's give them some encouragement. Let's say, yeah, that's great. Obviously noticing, going out of our way to notice when behaviors are changing for the better. If someone gives you an encouraging, word, to definitely appreciate that and be appreciative and be vocal about that. Talking people up. This is one thing that I do. If I ever hear something good about anybody, I pass that on to them, I pass it on to their superior. I have sent countless emails as a consultant to, supervisors and managers and leaders to say, hey, I've been working with your person and they are doing great. Be authentic. So, when we're being encouraging, let's avoid being cliche and platitudes. And don't limit yourself to words. So what does that mean? Well, buy someone a coffee, take them out for lunch, send them an email. Don't just be like, hey, great job, right? There's other things that you can do. So the second behavior that is, my special sauce is empathy, demonstrating empathy. So there's this quote, I don't know who said it, it's just on picturequotes.com. Instead of putting others in their place, put yourself in their place. And I think this is especially important and relevant when it comes to, business analysts helping businesses, because they're asking you for your help and they are struggling with something. And instead of being, snarky and condescending and being superior, having an attitude, understand that they're struggling and that we're there to help them. So how do we demonstrate empathy? What does that look like? Well, we have to ask questions to understand what they're going through. We have to recognize and validate their emotions, because yeah, there are emotions. People get upset when you're coming in and changing their world. We have to recognize that other people and ourselves, we have limitations. We all do. And rather than criticize their limitations, let's accept the fact that they have limitations and let's help them through those limitations, because we may not have the same limitations and we can, carry the ball forward. We have to accept their interpretation. Sometimes we may not agree with what, the business thinks is happening or what the root cause is, but that's what they think. So we have to accept that. We're not going to change their mind about it necessarily. And maybe we don't have to. Maybe it doesn't matter if we agree on the root cause, as long as we agree on the solution and how we move forward. The other thing that I think is really, really critical here is withholding judgment. Again, I've seen a lot of this in the business world between, IT and the business, is this judgment, right? Again, project teams have their skill set, the business has their skill set, and, they may not overlap or align, but it doesn't mean that one is right or one is wrong. Be open to the ideas and thoughts of your stakeholders. Offer help wherever you can. As a consultant, when I come in, I have a statement of work. I have specific things that I'm tasked with doing. But sometimes what I'll see is I'll see the business and someone in the business unit, and they're doing something and they're doing it like, the hardest way possible, right? With the most amount of effort and time. And I'm the first person to be like, okay, let me help you with that, because, there's a, maybe an easier way to do this. Like, I can teach you something, I can show you something, or I can just, kind of do it for you and help you out. And sometimes my help is accepted and embraced, and sometimes it's not. But, always I am there to offer the help. Again, being helpful, that's my special sauce. Another key point around empathy, and this applies to every aspect of our life, every engagement, everything we do and say, think about, is to be aware of your biases. We all have biases. Let's be honest. All of us have biases. There is a danger in not being aware of your own biases. So you need to be aware of them. You need to accept the fact that you have biases, and you need to challenge them when they pop up and when they're preventing you from being open. So those are the 13 behaviors and bonus behaviors regarding relationship trust. So I'm just going to briefly touch on organizational trust, which is the third wave. So there are characteristics related to low trust organizations, and I'm sure we've all seen some of this, but in a low trust organization, people will withhold, manipulate, hoard, or distort facts. So there's a lot of, people being disingenuous, not showing the full picture. Credit is extremely important, and people will step all over each other to get credit, whether they deserve it or not, whether it's theirs. New ideas tend to be resisted and stifled. New ideas might challenge the status quo. New ideas might make someone look bad, because why weren't we doing this all along? Mistakes are covered up or they're covered over. There's a lot of games, blame games, power games, reputation games, you name it. Games, games, games. I've seen organizations where people are far more invested in playing games than they are in getting any results. And then in a low trust organization, and again, this is very, very true, there are topics that are just non-starters. You cannot discuss them. You can't bring them up. There's no way to address them. So that's how you know you're in a low trust organization. In a high trust organization, it's kind of the opposite. People are candid and authentic. And again, authentic is kind of an overused term in my view, but authenticity is definitely a thing. There's more open sharing of information. There's more sharing of credit and granting of credit. I've been in some high trust organizations where people would literally argue about like who gets the credit, as in not they get the credit, but someone else does. No, 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 you did the most. No, no, you did. So I like seeing that. I think that's very healthy. In a high trust organization, new ideas are welcome and mistakes are tolerated as a way of learning. And this is actually, an important concept, right? Earlier there was this quote about mistakes of competence can be forgiven, but mistakes of character and integrity are not so easily forgiven. What I found in low trust organizations is that mistakes of character are far more tolerated than mistakes of competence, which I think is really interesting and way backwards. In high trust organizations, people talk straight and confront real issues, and there's a high degree of accountability, and that's really important. So what I want to say about this is we know from change management, organizational change management, we know that organizations don't change. Organizations change because individuals within the organizations make a change. So when it comes to trust in organizations, I find that it's the exact same pattern. So you don't, create a high trust organization. It's individuals within the organization making that trust, giving that trust, getting that trust that make that high trust organization. So, if you're going to think about, well, my organization, is it high trust or low trust, and how do I impact that? Well, it happens one person at a time. And, hopefully you're that person. All right, there's this notion of market trust, which I think as consumers, we're all sort of familiar with what this is, maybe not particularly articulating it, but it's all about reputation. We want to buy products and services, obviously, from companies that we trust, and brands are always judged based on people's perceptions. So trustworthy brands generates strong competitive advantage for the company. And I quite like this cartoon here, in terms of the privacy being the foundation for the brand trust or the market trust, because privacy is a really hot topic these days. So I thought that was quite relevant. So the last wave of trust, the fifth wave, is societal trust. So trust is an integral part of the fabric of our society. Heavy costs are incurred by a closed, low trust society. And I think we know this instinctively. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but there are countries in the world that exhibit this low trust society. But if we live in a high trust society, there's a lot of benefits. So we're sharing knowledge, which means we get more medical breakthroughs and technology breakthroughs. There's economic partnerships and cultural exchanges. So as a society, this is what we want to move towards. And again, the same as the change management, the same as the brand trust, the organizational trust, pardon me, it's one person at a time. It's the high trust society comes from the individuals. It's somewhat impacted by the government, of course. So those are the 5 ways of trust. So in summary, what I want to just go over these points is the takeaway here is that developing trust with your stakeholders basically allows you to move quicker. It allows for better business outcomes. Why better business outcomes? Not just faster outcomes, but better, because they will tell you more. They will tell you more about why things are broken, what is broken. They won't hide things from you. If you become that gold standard trusted advisor, that's where you get the good stuff from your business, from your stakeholders, and you can help them more. You can be more effective. You can move more quickly, more agile. So in summary, the speed of trust is impactful to business and projects and should not be underestimated. Do not underestimate trust. So this quote here, which I think we all know this instinctively: trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. So that is my formal presentation. I am happy to take questions now. Victoria, I'm not sure, were you going to?
Yep, I'm looking at the chat right
Oh,
now. I
okay,
see
super.
Edison says thank you. So feel free to drop questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself as well and ask questions directly. Heather says thank you, Sheila. Great presentation.
Yeah, thank you to everybody. Thank you so much for giving me your time and attention. This is something I'm really passionate about. It's been a real help in my career, and I hope it helps other people as well. If anyone has any questions that they don't want to share in the public forum, you can just reach out to me on LinkedIn. So I'm Sheila Harris on LinkedIn. You can find me. I think I'm the only BA on LinkedIn that's Sheila Harris, so feel free to reach out to me.
Great message. Trust is a core to expediting growth. That was from David.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, David. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really succinct way of putting it.
Mina says thanks.
Well, thank you, Mina. Thank you for your attention. All right. Well, it looks like we don't have any. Oh, do you have any advice on how to repair trust when it is broken? Yes. Well, that is a great question, and it's relevant, not just to our business lives, but to our personal lives. I would say, I think it's very key to go slowly and to be transparent. If you know that you have broken trust with someone, rather than take steps to try and mend it without, acknowledging that it's happened, I think that's a mistake. So, I've made mistakes with my business users. Absolutely. I've made missteps in my career. And the best path for me has been to sit them down and say, yeah, absolutely. You know what? I screwed up. I dropped the ball. I messed up. I made a mistake. And here's what I'm going to do to fix this, to try and fix this. So don't sweep it under the rug, I guess. I would say be very transparent about the fact that it's happened and be very transparent about what you're willing to do to repair that. Does that help, Jackie? Super. Excellent. Do you coach or model these behaviors during a time with an organization and see changes in the organization when you leave? I absolutely, absolutely do. And one of the things that I do is I don't like those toxic behaviors where we talk smack about the business. And unfortunately, I see that a lot. And what I see is that it becomes ingrained in an organization or in a department to talk smack about, it's us versus them, right? And that becomes really ingrained. So what I like to do is, because I'm coming in from the outside, I like to disrupt that whole relationship. And I very, deliberately will call people out on it in such a way that they can change that behavior. And instead of saying, I really don't like when you talk smack about the business, I'll say, the guys, the business, they're trying really hard. They're doing this and this, I think we really need to give them credit. So rather than criticize the behavior, I'll encourage the appropriate behavior. And I absolutely do it all the time. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't early on in my career. It's scary. It's scary to go into an organization where there is a pattern, and go in there and disrupt it and say, no, I don't like this pattern, and I'm not going to participate. But you'd be surprised how easy it is to disrupt it. There's this thing about gossip, right? And I read this, and one of these things I present on is the benefit of the doubt. So there's this pattern with gossip. Gossip is not started by the person that says the first thing. It's by the person that says the second thing. So for example, if there's a scenario where you're around the water cooler, or someone comes up to you and says, hey, yeah, John's been off sick a lot lately, rather than, buy into that and say, well, yeah, what's John, and, he doesn't show up and blah, 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 we're carrying his load. What you say, you shut it down and you say, well, I hope John's doing great. He's a great guy. And that's it. And it ends there. So it might seem, people try and manipulate you to get into these situations where you're critical, and you don't have to. So I definitely have seen changes in organizations, I'm proud to say. And I would encourage all of you, it's actually not, it's not as hard as you think it is. And once you do it the first time, it's easier the second time, it's even easier the third time. And I would encourage you all, if you're in a toxic organization, or if you're in a toxic relationship, or if you see toxic relationships, don't buy into it, and do what you can in a positive way to foster that change. I hope that answers your question, Andrea.
Yes, it did. And thanks. It was a great presentation.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. All right, so it seems like that might be all the questions. Again, thank you everybody so much for your time and attention today. I really appreciate it. I believe the PowerPoint or the slide deck is available as a PDF. And again, if you know, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions, or if you just want to join my network, or you know, whatever you need from me. What do you do if someone ends up in a low trust organization? I'm not entirely sure if I understand that question. Like, if you find yourself in a low trust organization, honestly, sometimes some organizations you can't change. Sometimes the organization is just going to be a low trust organization. And I have found myself in that scenario. And ultimately, I've just left. I don't want to be a party to it. If I can't make a positive change, if I find that the organization is changing me rather than the other way around, in a negative way, then for me, I don't know, some fights just aren't worth it. You have to pick your battles, right? So for me, I just, sort of gravitate towards a higher trust organization. That's my approach. Can't fix everything, right?
Absolutely. Sometimes I think, though, we get into environments that are overly competitive, and then trust seems to be like second, or competition and being able to be the person who takes credit. And I think you addressed that during your presentation.
I think it's all
Yeah.
about ego, Victoria. Like, I think it's about, why do you need the credit? If the business is getting the solution that they need, if things are improving, why do you need to take the credit? Like, that's all ego. Like, let the ego go. It's not it shouldn't ever be about the ego. I know we're all very talented professionals. We got a lot of letters behind our names. That should be enough, right? You know your worth. You know what you're capable of doing. You know what you've accomplished. Why do you have to trumpet it to the world? Why can't you just be quietly satisfied that you've made a change for the better?
Yeah.
I think ego is the downfall of people. Again, like my client said, dealing with consultants that are, snarky and condescending, that's all about ego. And that's a misstep. Those consultants are not coming back to his organization. He's never going to work with them again, right?
Absolutely.
Mina, I'm so glad that you work for a high trust organization. That's fantastic. I'm very happy for you.
Any other questions for Sheila?
All right. Again, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day and enjoy the conference. And yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, Sheila. This was a
Thanks.
great presentation. Everyone enjoyed it. You have a great
Super.
day.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.